So this is the endorsement interview for House District 49. We have with us here today Zach Hudson and Greg Johnson. Mr. Johnson, why don't you start and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for this seat.
My name is Greg Johnson, and I've been married for 49 years. I have 3 adult children, 3 grandchildren. I've moved into the Troutdale area in 1997. I was transferred here on my job for the Boeing company. I was a tool engineer, and I stayed in the same house since we've been here. We're at the same location. Retired from the Boeing company and vacationed for a couple of years. And then I've been volunteering for different things. I want to pay back to the community because I love the state of Oregon. I love where we live, Troutdale. I volunteer for Multnomah County Sheriff's Office Citizen Patrol. Done that for a few years. Got interested in radios, and I took a ham radio license test and passed that and got a ham license. And they had me as a technician for the radios at the SAT office in Corbett. And then I volunteered for Multnomah County ARES, or Amateur Radio Emergency Services. So I've been doing that. So those are the 2 volunteer things I've been doing since I've retired, and thoroughly enjoy them. Recognized a need here to run for this position and support my community, and so here I am.
Great.
To do that.
Remind me, whose seat was this prior to this election cycle?
This seat is currently held by Chris Gorsuch. He is running for the Senate now that Lori Monis Anderson is retiring.
Got it. Zach, how about you introduce yourself to us?
Great, thank you. Well, my name is Zach Hudson. I'm a teacher at Reynolds High School. I'm now starting my 6th year at Reynolds High. I teach special ed math. I've taught many things all over the East County area. I've taught at Gresham High School, Corbett High School, and Mount Hood Community College. I also serve on the Troutdale City Council. I'm finishing up my 1st term. Before that, I served on the Troutdale Citizens Advisory Committee and the Budget Committee, and have quite enjoyed other volunteer and community activities, like helping organize the Troutdale Summerfest and other community events and things like that. I'm running because I want to continue the good work that Representative Gorsuch has been doing, and to push forward on important issues that we need in Oregon, things like supporting education, increasing access to healthcare, standing up for civil rights, protecting our natural spaces and our natural resources, and many other important issues. And so those are the things that I would be interested in focusing on if I'm elected to the legislature.
Great. How would you, and I'd like to ask each of you this question, but I'll start with you, Zach. How would you grade Representative Gorsuch, and how would you be different from him?
I think he has done an excellent job. I appreciate the bills that he has put forward. He was successful. There was so little legislation that was able to get through this most recent session, and I appreciate that Representative Gorsuch was able to stop the practice of taking away people's driver's licenses for inability to pay in certain situations. If people need to drive to get to a job, and you prevent them from going to their job, they're not going to be able to pay fines that they needed to pay before. And so I thought this was an important equity issue, and it also made a lot of sense. He has introduced legislation to audit TriMet so that they can be more accountable to their community. And he has plans coming up to get more data from our police and our other law enforcement organizations, so that we can actually answer questions in these times about how law enforcement is operating in various situations. So I appreciate his innovation in legislation and his commitment to his community.
Great. Greg, what's your view on Representative Gorsuch, and how would you be different?
Well, I'm not as familiar with Representative Gorsuch's past. I really don't know a lot about his past and what he's done. What I have noticed, though, coming out of Salem, are a lot of new tax increases that I'm concerned about, and I'd like to find out more about them and see why they were passed. I would like to find out, which I would find out more about going to Salem, is get a better understanding of what is happening in Salem.
Okay, great. Well, let me ask you, if you were sent to Salem, what's the first bill you would seek to introduce?
Well, the biggest concern I have right now, of course, is this pandemic. I feel that we are heading into a very difficult financial recession coming up. I think that a number of we know there's a lot of small business owners that have gone under. A lot of them are in difficult situation because of the restrictions that have been placed on them. And so I think the biggest issue that we need to deal with right now is how to get these businesses up and going and getting these people back to work, to where they can resume the lifestyle that they had prior to this pandemic. And yet still, we need to be aware that this is a dangerous virus. We need to protect the vulnerable, but there's a lot of healthy people that I believe have been restricted more than necessary, and I think it's time to start opening some of that up and just keep track of it as we go along.
Great. Zach, what is the first legislation you would introduce?
So I agree that recovery from the COVID pandemic and economic recovery and our public health approach to COVID is a very important thing. My concern is that people carry the COVID virus asymptomatically and can spread it. And so when you say there are a lot of healthy people who could begin to interact again in ways that they haven't been before, we have to point out that those people who appear healthy could well be spreading. I think it's really important that we pay attention to the public health experts and not be, you can't rely on gut feelings when it comes to setting public health policy. And so I think that going forward, we absolutely do need to work on economic recovery and supporting small businesses and working people. But it really needs to be guided by some sound science. Now, for my part, I haven't picked any legislation, but I've been talking to some groups with whom I share values in common, groups like the Oregon Center for Public Policy, the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, and others who have some policy idea or have some legislative ideas, and I would love to work with them. I haven't picked any in particular yet. Whatever I do decide to put forward would be guided by my values and priorities: protecting working people, supporting education, increasing the quality of life for the people of Oregon.
Zach, I noticed in the voters pamphlet you have a number of endorsements, a lot. I didn't count them, but a lot. Which one would you point to as the one you're most proud of? You have to pick one. You can't do the whole I love them all thing.
Oh, okay, interesting. Oh, great. Tough question.
I'm sorry. I hit the button here. See if I can get back on. Can you hear me?
You're still there.
Yep.
I am. I can't see myself.
So,
Well, you got to deal with me then.
well, I am a union member, and both my parents were proud union members as well. I remember walking with my mother, who belonged to SEIU, when I was a kid, and we drove up to Salem. I grew up in Ashland, and I remember marching with her and seeing the Capitol. And I'm honored to have the endorsement from SEIU. And when I told my mom about that, she was absolutely thrilled that it was her union that she had worked so hard for, which I had now gained the support of.
Greg, is there someone who's endorsing you that that you would point to as someone you're proud of having their endorsement?
This is kind of strange not being able to see you guys, and I don't know how to get you back on the screen, but are you able to see me?
We are, and you seem fine.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't see you guys, but I'm just looking at a big letter Zoom. And anyway, frankly, I've only got on board in the mid-August, and I've been busy, and I really haven't gone out to look for endorsements, and I should have, but I've been really short on time, and I haven't had a chance to do that as far as the places that I would have gone. In fact, I just haven't had the time to do it, or haven't taken the time, excuse me, and that would be law enforcement because of my volunteering for the Sheriff's Department.
That's actually a good segue. Aaron, can I ask a question?
Of course.
We can start with you, Greg. I'm curious first what your thoughts are on the protests that have been going on for 100+ days. And also back in June, the Senate, oh, Greg, are you still there?
Well, I'm sorry. I just turned the light back on thinking
No
that
problem.
maybe that way I could see something, but I hit something here and it's strange. But anyway,
Yeah, I guess we can just treat it like a phone call then, just.
Yeah,
and then,
okay.
Yeah. And then also, so your thoughts on the protests, and also back in June, the Senate, or the legislature, sorry, passed a series of criminal justice reform bills. I'm wondering if you felt like those bills went far enough, or if you felt like they went too far in the way of criminal justice reform, or overall what your thoughts were on that package of bills.
Well, as far as the protesting downtown, I feel that people need to be able to protest, but they need to do it lawfully. I don't think that injuring other people or jeopardizing the safety of other people is acceptable. I think that's a crime. I do not have a problem at all with people protesting and voicing their opinion and their views, but I think it needs to be done in a peaceable manner, in a way that's acceptable and doesn't injure other people or damage property. And as far as the bills, I'm sorry, I did read through some that I was given, but I can't specifically talk to you about those because I don't know enough about them to really give you my opinion.
No problem. And Zach, same to you. Your thoughts on the protests, and then your thoughts on those that package of criminal justice bills.
Yes. I'd like to recognize that first off, the protests that arose in the wake of the murder of George Floyd are a very important demonstration by our community that we do indeed need reforms in law enforcement. And so I definitely support the message. I actually agree with Greg that such protests should never be violent. And I'm honored to have the endorsement of—
I see you again, sorry.
I'm honored to have the endorsement of Sheriff Mike Reese, actually, Multnomah County Sheriff Mike Reese. And I agree with him in that matter. In fact, Sheriff Reese has done, I think, some really wonderful work, even before the protests, reaching out to the community and standing up for Black lives. And I look forward to continuing that work and moving that forward. I think the bills that passed this summer were an important first step, such as banning chokeholds and things along those lines. I would like to see that work continue into the session, because we need to get to a place where our community and our law enforcement can work together. And I think the kinds of changes that are coming about are going to be an important step in that direction.
You're on mute, Aaron. Oh, there.
Tess, do you have other questions?
Not for now. I'll let you get back to it.
I'd like to have the chance to have each of you ask the other a question. I suspect you haven't had much chance to interact this cycle. It's been difficult for people to get in the same room, and here's an opportunity. So if you'd like to ask your opponent a question, this is the chance to do it.
Not at all, actually. The first time I got to, I guess, meet Mr. Johnson was at the West Columbia Gorge Chamber of Commerce Forum, which was held a couple of days ago. But it's true, no, we haven't had a chance to interact before then. But Greg, thank you for your participation in our community. Did I understand right? Were you also part of the volunteer sheriffs who helped out at the Corbett schools?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. My kids go to the CAP school, and so they may well have walked past you on the way in through the doors some of those days before the shutdown. So I appreciate your service and being a part of our community.
Well, thank you. And I've really enjoyed the opportunity to help out there. It's been good. Probably the topic I would like to talk about too is law enforcement, now that we're on it. There's been discussion about cutting back the monies to the Sheriff's Department. And I know when the COVID first started back in March, and they basically sidelined us as volunteers. But because of some of the cuts that took place then, crime increased quite a bit. And then shortly after they were talking about budget cuts, they also eliminated the resource officers, which I have some real concerns with, because as helping out in Corbett, the resource officer there stayed pretty busy, and he had a lot of challenges he had to face. And I can't imagine school getting back together without resource officers, particularly in some of the larger schools in Portland. So that's where I'm coming from. I really feel that if anything, I think that our law enforcement, we want the best law enforcement we can possibly have. I think if anything, what we need is more training to have our police department, our sheriff's department, the best trained in the country. So.
Yes, I largely do agree with that. The calls to defund the police, I really do believe, if you look into them, are calls to reform the police and to change the burden of policing to make sure that non-police, we tend to call the police for everything. We call the police as our first line of defense because we don't know exactly who needs to be dealing with what, and we want someone to come out in the case of an emergency. And yet there are situations where somebody else might be able to respond to a situation better, to defuse, de-escalate, provide social services in a situation. And so having police be the first responders in those cases not only overburdens the police, but then also shifts things that didn't used to be a law enforcement situation into exactly that, where an officer may find that they are not the thing that they are trained to do, which is, determine whether a crime is taking place and intervene, stop any, protect people's safety immediately, and decide whether an arrest needs to be made, is not actually what the situation is called for. And so, though I don't want to certainly get rid of any police officers, I think a structural reform that that lets dispatchers use a broader array of responders, including social services and mental health, could help everybody out. And that's a direction I'd like to see. You asked about school resource officers, and I think part of what we need to recognize there is that the school resource officer program was created really with the best of intentions. And I do believe that the officers who act as school resource officers do have the best of intentions. But part of what we need to look at is impact versus intent. And we're getting a lot of data that says that the programs themselves, despite what they want to do, which is to create greater connections between the resource officers and the students they serve, is having some deleterious effects, especially on communities of color. And so I don't think that we can discount that data just because we like the officers themselves. And I mean, I work at a school, and I've always had great interactions with the school resource officers there. But we can't base it only on my interactions. We need to look at how it affects the more impacted communities, including, the Black and communities of color. And we can't count on our own experiences to be the judge of whether a program is effective.
Could I come back now on this, or do you want to start another?
No, sure, please respond. That's fine.
Okay, as in the Citizen Patrol, where we were not armed, we always had to be together. We always had to have contact with radios for our safety. A number of times we saw things that were questionable, and we would call it in. Sure, we were out there. We would call it in. We'd call in the license number, and we would hear back, "Don't go anywhere near them. That person has a past history where your safety could be in jeopardy." We had that happen a number of times. So that would be my concern of sending other people out, unless they were able to go out and get back in contact with the sheriff's department before they proceeded, because things can change or escalate in a very short period of time and get out of control. And if they don't, the people that are confronting these people don't have the proper skills in the backup, it could be a real issue. And a lot of times the deputies themselves won't approach people on their own because of their own personal safety. So, and you brought up some of the things that were passed, and you mentioned them, and I don't understand them fully. But what I will say is that police officers are out there, and their job is to enforce the law. And they need to do it in a proper manner. But if you take away their non-lethal ability to stop the force against them, you leave them only the lethal force as a means of stopping someone. And so we got to be very careful with that. Because that could lead to more problems.
All right. I think we have reached the point where we ask what we describe sometimes as the fun question, which is meant to just get to know you a little bit by asking you a personal question. Actually, I'm going to ask you a personal question that isn't as much fun.
Okay.
I need to get both of your ages.
Oh.
Zach, how old are you?
41.
41. Greg, how old are you?
I am 69.
Great. So the fun question is, what's the most awkward moment you've had on a Zoom call?
Okay. Sure. So I'm speaking to you from my office. My office has a door that closes, and that's important to keep out the noise from the rest of the house. You know, I have 3 kids, and so if I need to focus on an important Zoom call, I'll close the door. We have 2 cats. One of these cats is offended by the idea that any door in the house should be closed because she needs to go where she needs to go. And so I was actually on a Zoom call with the Capitol Club, which are the group of lobbyists who work within the Capitol. And this was a introduce yourself and get to know you event with a bunch of the potentially incoming legislators. And so it was my 3 minutes to introduce myself and say a bit about me and what my interests were in the legislature. And that's when my cat decided that she needed to be let out of the office, and it was urgent that that happened now. So I had to decide whether to plow through or pause, and I ended up actually trying to plow through, which meant that I had a background chorus of meows letting the Capitol Club know how I wasn't paying attention to my cat.
Great. Greg?
Well, the beauty of my most embarrassing moment on Zoom, you captured right on your screen here. So it's a beautiful thing. It doesn't require a lot of explanation. I reached over to change the light thinking it might help the lighting, but when I did that, I hit the mouse and a different screen popped up. So, but I was able to figure out what went on and resolve the problem. But that you saw it, you got it right on tape here. So it's a beautiful thing.
It wasn't so bad overall.
No, actually, I want to thank you guys for inviting me to this. This has been
You
good.
joined us. Thank you so much to both of you for giving us an interesting and thoughtful conversation.
All right.
All right, have a good
Appreciate it.
evening.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.